Good evening, members, officers, and portfolio holders. Thank you for coming this evening. Welcome to the Community O&S Committee meeting. Emma, have we had any informal questions?
No, Chairman.
Item 1. The minutes of the meeting which took place on the 27th of January have been laid on the table for the last 30 minutes. Are you content that I sign these as a correct record of those meetings? Councillor James?
Yes, Chair. No, I'm not content. Paragraph 6, page 3. We were promised an update on this MRF 186,000 worst case figure for this meeting and before this meeting, and we haven't had it. So it's not a correct record of what was agreed that evening.
Chairman, if I could assist. There was an action to do with the MRF arising from the last meeting, and that was actioned by the portfolio holder writing to all members with the details that were requested, and that's happened.
I can resend that to you, Councillor James.
Well, I wasn't included with that letter, so it's not a correct record. It's neither a correct record in the minutes, and it's not a correct record of what's been actioned.
Damien?
Chairman, it's all I'm aware of is it was sent to all members. If any members haven't got it, then I think it can be resent. And you could amend the notes to reflect the fact that that note has gone out.
Would you be happy that we note that what Damien's just said on the minutes, make an alteration to the minutes to ensure that all members get a copy who haven't received one? And I'd like to apologise that you haven't received it. Councillor James.
Well, it's not a correct minute, is it, Chairman? So either we're agreeing that the minutes are correct or we're not.
A note is made in the minutes, and we'll ensure we'll add a note and make sure that you get a copy of the letter that was sent out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Byam.
Is it possible that, I mean, I can search through here if we know where the when it was sent and who from, and we can see whether Councillor James is on the list.
On the circulation list.
On the circulation.
Yeah, by all means, would you like to investigate that for us and come back to me, and we'll inform all the parties concerned, okay?
So we could do it now if I search properly, but
it was posted in the post. It wasn't emailed, but we can email it
right, okay.
First thing tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Byam?
Yep, that's fine.
You put your microphone, thank you. Item 2, apologies for absence and substitutions. Have there been any apologies?
We have apologies from Councillors Mary Forozeski, Nick Williams, Andrew Wilson and Patricia Ellis. Thank you. There are no substitutes.
Thank you. Item 3. In accordance with the Waverley Code of Conduct, do members have any non-pecuniary or disclosable pecuniary interest to declare? No? Item 4, questions from members of the public. Have there been any questions received from members of the public?
None received, Chairman.
I'd now like to go to introductions. Would the officers present please like to introduce themselves to the committee?
Thank you, Chairman. Damien Roberts, Director of Operations.
Kelvin Mills, Head of Community Services and Major Projects.
Rob Anderton, Head of Environmental Services.
Louise Norrie, Corporate Policy Manager.
Lara McKenzie, Policy and Performance Officer.
Thank you very much. Yep.
Daniel Brett, Projects Coordinator, Communities.
Thank you. Item 5, Committee Work Programme. The Committee's work programme is attached at page 7 and details progress since the last meeting on several areas of work under the remit of this committee. This item is for noting, but do members have any comments before we proceed, please? Councillor Ramsdale.
Thank you, Chairman. I wondered if, relating to the Air Quality Action Plan, we could have an update as to how do we make things happen in Farnham. I appreciate this is a county council issue, and we discussed it at length last meeting, but it was that made me say I wanted to come back and say, well, you know, how do we get it to move forward? Rob, I guess this is your area.
Rob?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Ramsdale is absolutely right. The issue here is that all the solutions sit with the County Council as the Highways Authority, but what we have done in the past and what we continue to do is work with relevant officers at the County Council to both scope out and look at the feasibility of various solutions, and also to lobby them to ensure that those solutions are prioritised and looked at as part of the solution to the problem. But ultimately, other than facilitating those meetings and lobbying them to prioritise any actions that might come out of those meetings, there is really a limit to what else we can do.
But are they doing anything? Is there anything positive we can take back to the people of Farnham that county have said they're going to do, or is it just all fall back into a sleepy hollow?
I think the challenge is that any solution is going to require a significant expenditure on some major engineering work, and so you know that needs to be viewed against all the other priorities that the county has in terms of its transport network across the whole of Surrey. You know, I think we've got a good working relationship with them. They're supporting us in terms of providing us with data and assisting us with any of those feasibility studies. In terms of where those schemes then sit on the priority on a county-wide basis, you know, that's the challenge. The Farnham air quality issue is one of very many issues that the county council faces across the piece. And so all we can really do is work alongside them and ensure that our voice is heard when they're looking at prioritising their transport infrastructure investments.
Thank you, Rob. Councillor Else.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just like to congratulate Katie Webb. She has met all the criteria on her work programme from the last meeting, and I think the Ageing Well strategy looks to be progressing as it should, and I'm very pleased to see that. And if I may, I'd just like to ask one question on the waste and recycling, where it says customer satisfaction with the councillor's curbside refuse and commingled recycling service continues to be high. I'm pleased to hear that, but I've never been asked, although I am very satisfied with the recycling here, but I'd just like to be refreshed, if I may, in knowing how you actually attain this feedback.
Rob?
Chairman, we use the council citizens panel. And so a year or so after the launch of the service, we asked the citizens panel a number of questions about the new service. We subsequently went to the citizens panel to consult them on our proposals around garden waste and asked some supplementary questions around the curbside service. And then more recently, we went back to them to ask what they thought of the new garden waste service, and again asked some supplementary questions around the core service. So on a regular basis, we're consulting with our residents through the citizens panel, which is a representative panel of residents from across the borough.
You can come back.
Thank you, Chairman. So that's good. Am I right in thinking there's 100 people on the citizens panel, or how many are on? And I'd just like to know that so I understand fully.
Louise looks after the citizens panel for us, so she'll be able to answer that, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. At its peak, it was about 1,300. We've been decreasing slightly, but it's over 1,000.
Thank you. Councillor Coburn.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. 2 points, if I may, and I've no idea whether I should be speaking on either. The first one is just going back to air quality, which I wasn't going to mention, but one way that Waverley can help is with planning applications, and especially with the cumulative effect of planning applications. And I'm not sure that we comment strongly enough on planning applications that are going to have a direct effect on the air quality area because, you know, as Councillor Ramsdale pointed out, this is an ongoing thing. It's been going on for years and years and years. We've got data coming out of our ears and absolutely nothing happening. But, you know, there's no doubt with all the pressure on development, this is going to just exacerbate an already poor situation. What I was actually going to ask a question now, if I may, Chairman, and again, I don't know whether this is the right space, but, you know, we've got the local plan, both on our updates on local plan, on our plan, and on the executive rolling programme. And there is one issue which I'm raising in every forum and not sure how far it's going and where it's landing, and that is the shortage, in fact, the complete and utter lack of SANGs. Now, for a long time, this has been thought of as a Farnham issue, that SANGs is something that affects development in Farnham. For every house you build in Farnham, you need some mitigation land. But as things stand at the moment, not only can Farnham not deliver its neighbourhood plan, but Borough cannot deliver a local plan. It just cannot deliver a single one of its scenarios. There are 200 spaces left in Farnham Park. After that, there is no identified suitable alternative natural green space. And so I would like to put pressure on. I don't know how this works, whether I'm putting it on our work programme, asking for a report on this, or whether I'm asking it to go on to the executive programme to take it more seriously. But we are talking urgency now. We know the theory, we know the law, you know, we know exactly what's left in Farnham Park. We need action on this, and I'm terribly worried that we're still wringing our hands and debating. It affects housing, it just affects so many departments. But if you're not all talking together, you're never going to come up with a solution. So quite where it goes, I don't know, but I just had to raise it.
Maybe we should ask the question. Before I come to you, Damien, there's two questions here. One of them was the planning issue with regard to air quality, and I actually agree with Councillor Coburn here, because the more houses you put in, the more traffic you generate, the worse the air quality becomes. So I don't know how we're going to address that. And the second one, of course, is you know, a lot of the towns and parishes are doing their local plan, their neighbourhood plan at the present time, and we need to understand where the SANG is going to come from, because, you know, if you without the SANG, I don't know, have we tried going cross border, for instance, to Alice Holt or whatever? Perhaps you can advise us.
Chairman, if I pick up, by the way, they're two really helpful questions, so thank you. If I pick up on the SANG question and on the air quality, I'll invite Rob Anderton to answer that one. The issue of the supply of SANG is a really important component of the development of our local plan. Matthew Evans, who isn't here tonight because we don't have any items on the agenda specifically on planning, I'm sure he would be happy to bring the work that's in progress as part of the local plan to this meeting, to share with members the methodology that's been followed to look at where additional SANG may come from, but also to share with you the challenge that Councillor Coburn very accurately described.
Carol, do you want to come back on that?
Yes, I mean, thank you for the answer, and you know, I understand the difficulty. We don't need another report on the issue. We don't need another report that tells us your latest consultation on SANGs has produced nothing. We actually need some action from this council going out and acquiring SANGs, and that's my issue with this. I've had reports. We've got reports on reports. You know, when you've been around as long as we have and you've heard this over and over again, we're past that. That's what I said earlier. We're past the theory. Unless we go out actively as a borough and seek SANGs, you cannot deliver any one of your scenarios in the local plan, because you will not be able to build a single house in Farnham. And this is an issue for the whole borough. No houses in Farnham. Either you reduce the figure by a huge amount or you build them elsewhere. You don't have a choice. It's UK law.
Chairman, just to respond on that issue. I wasn't anticipating that Matthew Evans would come back and talk about further consultation. As part of the development of the local plan, we have been talking with consultants around how we can expand the SANG opportunities within Waverley. There's no easy choices. The challenge is significant, but it is about, I think, the opportunity to engage members in all the routes by which we can try and move this forward. There may not be a total solution in the offering, but there's certainly more that we would like to do. And I think Matthew Evans would welcome the opportunity to engage you all in that discussion.
Can I just come back there, Damien? Just to go back to what Councillor Coburn was saying, the issue is a major issue here, because if we haven't got SANG, you can't build in Farnham, we can't have a local plan. You know, are we aware of this? Can we have confidence in the future of our local plan if we haven't got SANG?
Chairman, there are a lot of constraints on housing development. SANG is a major one, but there are many that contribute to the local plan, and they all have to be looked at thoroughly as part of that process. And if members are particularly interested in where we are at the moment with SANG, I think having a discussion at a future meeting would be helpful.
What we need at parish and town level is some sort of time frame here. So some sort of end. So we say we have to have these details by June of this year or whatever, because we need a local plan. Anyway, okay. Councillor Isherwood.
Hey, Chairman, just going to make the point that we have looked across the border to Alice Holt, amongst others, and Hampshire said no. Surprised.
Councillor Byam.
Well, can I just remind people, if my memory is incorrect, please shout me down, but at the joint planning committee that we had a few weeks ago on Crondall Lane, is that the correct place? In the middle of Farnham, and they came up with a solution for a SANG, and the members didn't like it. It was over the border. It was, I forget where it was now, if my memory is not, but nobody liked it because they wanted it the field at the end of the plot that was there. It was crazy. So it wasn't the officer's fault, it wasn't the developer's fault, it was the members' fault. We turned it down on that basis that we didn't have a SANG because they were going to drive past another SANG to get to the other SANG. We all sing the same SANG or something. I don't know where the story comes from. And it's absolutely crazy. I was so frustrated at that meeting that we didn't, and it was mainly Farnham members that were totally against the SANG that was being proposed.
Carol, do you want to come back on that?
Just one final thing, because I think this is one of the issues with all of this. It's such a complicated issue, and if you only deal with it once every blue moon, you don't understand it. Waverley has a duty to prove under law that its decisions do not harm the integrity of the SPA. That is what Waverley has a legal duty to do. And if you are charged with not having done that, then, there are serious sanctions. Yes, I'm sorry, Maurice, I know this inside and out. Maurice, yes, it did. And Natural England had to prove that SANGs, Natural England have to prove that the SPA is not being harmed. Waverley has to prove that its decisions do not harm its integrity. And this is the joint decision. So if people feel that a decision like a SANGs in Church Crookham is not actually going to maintain the integrity of the SPA, then they have to turn it down. It's a different issue, Maurice, but it's one that you have to take into account. And if there's a legal challenge to this, and there might well be, then you have to make sure, I don't know if it's the right decision, I'm just saying it has to be legal, and it has to be strong enough and robust enough to rebut a legal challenge, and that is the issue that Farnham councillors were raising.
Thank you. Rob Anderson, please. You want to say something?
Chairman, only briefly on Councillor Coburn's question around air quality and planning responses. I mean, certainly we do we do look very carefully at all planning applications in terms of our environmental health input. We're a statutory consultee, and we have particularly rigorous approach when those applications come in an air quality management area. So it's something that we're already actively doing, and we do make recommendations whenever planning consents are given around ways of mitigating the impact of those developments.
You see, I've never understood that, and I'm on the planning committee, and I never understand how you mitigate for, you know, for building more houses and more, you know, allowing more cars on the roads. You know, I don't know how you mitigate for it. I mean, I know you say we do, but it doesn't seem to have any effect. You know, and when I attend planning meetings, air quality very, very rarely comes up. Very rarely. Okay, thanks. Councillor Else.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure at what point this should be said, or how do we get things on the work programme? Is it now, or do we have to have a vote? I can't remember. Is it now? So
it's now.
It's now. So if I've got something that is concerning me, I think it underpins many, many of the difficulties that we experience and our officers have to deal with. And that is, I think it's been visited before, I think it needs visiting again, the amount of agency staff that we are working with. I think that is a real issue. I'm told that in housing, for example, a third of our staff are agency staff. That's far too many. And the reason could very well be that we are not attracting the right level of staff at the right salary.
I understand what you're saying, but that's a corporate issue for corporate ONS. It's not in our remit. But what I suggest you do is are you on corporate ONS? No. Is attend a meeting and ask the question, and you know, ask them to put it on a work programme. Okay. Thanks. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
Are members content to note the report? Members, are you content to note the report, please? Thank you. Okay. Executive Forward Programme, item 6. The Executive Forward Programme is attached on pages 9 through 12. Are there any items on the Forward Programme under the remit of the Community ONS Committee that members would like to be brought before the committee to consider before they are taken through to the Executive? That's pages 9 to 12. Councillor Else?
Thank you. Something very important to my own ward. I just want to reiterate that in late March, on page 10, topic 3, Elstead and Weyburn Neighbourhood Area Plan, in late March, Executive are going to be considering or deciding this, and I cannot emphasise enough, in my view, how important it is that the Weyburn development should be within the Elstead boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chairman. The format for this seems to have changed this month, to my eye. And what we've had on previous reports is an update on Brightwells. And of course, the briefing meeting for members last Monday was cancelled at the last minute, which means we haven't got an update on Brightwells, and yet that has been requested in previous meetings. Can we have an update on what the situation with that is, please?
Damien.
Chairman, as soon as there's an update, it will be available to members and be brought here if that is your request.
You want to come back on that?
Well, thanks, Chairman. Yes, I do. I mean, we had a meeting booked in our diaries. It was cancelled at the last minute. It's the one issue that exercises an awful lot of councillors given their actual ward responsibilities, but is the biggest expense this council's got, and quite frankly, it probably represents the biggest debt this council's got, and there's no delivery, and I think we need an update. It's as simple as that.
We'll make a note and for the executive. When will when will a full update be available? Damien, any idea?
Negotiations are ongoing, and I think when they reach a point when we're able to provide an update, then we will do so. It's not possible because it involves two parties to know when they will be concluded, but as soon as progress is made, an update will be made available.
That'll go out online, will it? Will it go in a bulletin or something?
A briefing meeting has already been referred to, which is no longer in the diary. My anticipation is at the point an update is available, that route will be put back in place.
So as soon as we've got a date for the information being complete, we'll set a briefing date. Okay, Councillor James? I know you're not happy with that, but that's the best we can do, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no, it's not an issue of whether I'm unhappy or not, Chairman. It's whether the ONS committee operates as it should, which is we get to see this and we get an update on it before it goes to full council. And the way this is being worked up at the moment looks very clear to me that we're not, as an ONS committee, going to get to see it. It's a very simple request. It reflects the terms of reference this committee's got. It's as simple as that. That's why my smile is wry, if that's what you were picking up on.
I think in this particular case, because the information is not available and it's such a big priority for the council, that a briefing for all councillors, not a council meeting, but a briefing, is the best way forward. Okay, that's my opinion. You know, the information is not available, so it can't be brought to the committee today. Okay, sorry. I apologise for that, but if it's not available, it's not available. Thank you. Are members content to note the forward programme? Thank you very much. Okay. Item 7. Recycling Improvement Action Plan 2014, though it's 2015. Okay. I'd like to invite Rob Anderton to introduce the report. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Chairman. So really just to recap, in 2012, as we all know, the council replaced its curbside sort service with a commingled system alongside weekly food waste collections. And that resulted initially in our recycling rate increasing to nearly 60%, up from around 39% before the change. And that put us in the upper quartile nationally in terms of recycling performance. However, following that initial surge, rates stabilised at just over 50%. In order to address this, a recycling improvement plan was developed, looking at the council's performance, identifying challenges associated with improving on that performance, and setting out a range of initiatives to further increase recycling levels, as well as reducing contamination levels in the blue bins and reducing residual waste tonnages. This committee considered the contents of that plan back in June last year, and it was subsequently endorsed by Executive in July. And so what we're now doing is presenting an updated version of the plan 6 months after adoption, which is to be found at Annex 1 to the report. It shows that very good progress has been made in a number of areas since its adoption, most notably with the very successful launch of the new garden waste subscription service, which has seen subscribers treble in number and tonnages also more than treble. A number of other actions identified, in particular the communications campaign, have a much longer lead-in time and are now only being implemented to go live over the coming months. So it's too early to measure the impact of those actions. However, a number of graphs are shown at Annex 2, which set out headline performance in key areas across the service throughout 2013 and 14. And as these show, the recycling rate in Waverley has increased since the action plan was adopted, from an average of just under 48% to an average of over 52%. And during the same period, both the volume of residual waste per household and the level of contamination found in the dry recycling bins has fallen. So the Council is now achieving the highest recycling performance it's achieved since March 2013. Recycling rates, residual waste tonnages and contamination rates are all now moving in the right direction, and it's hoped that this will continue as the new recycling communication campaign launches over the coming months. But in order to ensure that a strong focus is maintained on this project, I propose to bring a further report back to you in the summer, which will be the anniversary of the adoption of this plan, so that we can look again at the impact of those further initiatives, in particular the communications campaign.
Members, Councillor Coburn?
I mean, I think it's terrific, and I'm not surprised it falls off slightly, because I have to be honest, what I do on a Monday isn't always what I end up doing on a Friday. You know, the week sort of gradually you get more and more tired or whatever. But I do try my best, and I'm delighted that, you know, we're still doing well on this. Just on two small points, and these are actually the ones in the town centres. Apart from sometimes looking a mess, they do attract graffiti, and this really annoys me when we're, you know, trying to get recycling, and I put it all in the green pot. You know, we're improving the environment by doing this, and we had some graffiti. We had a sort of blitz one weekend, and everybody else seemed to come out and clean their graffiti or ask the town council to do it for them, apart from Waverley, and that wretched graffiti sat on that town centre in Central Car Park, rather spoiling the effect, and as far as I know it's still there, but I may be wrong on that one. So, you know, it's a small thing, but to me, litter, graffiti, recycling, it's all part of the same, you know, improving our environment. So, you know, when you have these centres that are meant to be looking after the environment, they look awful if, for whatever reason, they themselves are not clean, tidy and green looking.
Has that graffiti been reported?
Well, Chairman, it's not something that I'm aware of off the top of my head, but certainly now that it's been brought to my attention, I'll look into it. Certainly we have sort of quite challenging performance measures that we work with our contractor on, and we would expect that to be cleared within a couple of days of being reported, unless it was particularly challenging in terms of size or nature. But yeah, we do try and get onto graffiti very quickly indeed, so I'll look into that.
Thank you, Rob. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chairman. I wonder if we could have an update, even if it's a verbal one, on two other bits. The first one is the aspect that we've now got the on-street segregated recycling bins. They're in Cranley, for instance. It'd be interesting to understand how successful that initiative's been. And the other one was, clothing recycling bins in Stockton Square badged with Waverley Borough Council, and wondered if we could have an update on that, if that's now happened and been instigated, how we're doing on the revenue stream, because that was the premise for suggesting that we were going to introduce an additional curbside collection for clothing. It would be interesting to understand, if we've got the bins there, is this actually going to take it forward?
Would you like to update us, Rob?
Very happy to, yes. So the on-street recycling bins, certainly shortly after they were introduced, we looked at them and we did some composition analysis of both the residual side and the recycling side. It's fair to say that the level of contamination, as one would expect, is considerably higher than it would be in a domestic bin that's presented at the curbside. However, there was more recycling in the recycling side and more residual waste in the residual side, so the balance was right. And I think the important thing about those bins is less about the tonnage that we're getting out of them, and more about reinforcing the message wherever we can. And so to actually have that recycling on the go, reinforcing the same message, encouraging our residents to recycle whilst they're out and about in the street, that's really the impact of that scheme, more than capturing quality recycling out of the bins at the end of the day. The second question around textiles banks, I'm not aware of new textiles banks turning up at Stockland Square, although I shall certainly look into that. We've had textile banks at all of our Bring sites for a number of years. And the proposal to launch a curbside service was based on the fact that we still felt that there was a lot of textiles to be captured. And it's certainly something that we're going to keep a watching brief on, with a view to looking at whether we can roll that out once we've nailed the curbside service more in terms of the core offer that we're providing at the moment. But the textile banks do generate significant tonnage, and also they provide a good revenue stream for the council.
Thank you. Councillor Lee?
Thank you, Chairman. A question, Rob, about the communications campaign. I don't believe it's started yet. Can you help me to understand when you're intending to start it, and the sort of elements or the phases of it, and roughly when you anticipate it ending? Thank you.
We're proposing to start the communications campaign mid to late May. We've commissioned some designs from a couple of design houses, and we're currently looking at those and working with one of those design houses with a view to taking that forward. The campaign is going to be a prolonged campaign, initially for a year, but looking at potentially then morphing it into something else going forward. I think we're clear that what we need to do is sustain the pressure in terms of messages and keeping the presence there for our residents, in order to ensure that performance doesn't drop off. The nature of the campaign will be pretty much every possible imaginable piece of media you can think of. We'll be looking at press releases, making waves, literature through people's doors, bin hangers. We're looking at a roadshow programme to run through the summer of this year, rebranding and the vehicles with new advertising hoardings, because the last lot was done back in 2012, and we want to refresh that message. So essentially, across the board, every way in which we can get the message out, we'll be doing so.
Councillor Coburn?
Yes, one thing that obviously had a bad day, I do apologise on another beef, but one thing that really upsets me in Farnham is the waste of space in the Waverley notice boards in the car parks. And I did ask once, I don't know how I dare, if we could put something in when we were doing our Porter's bid for Farnham Craft Town. And I was told, oh, no, these are Waverley notice boards. Why doesn't Farnham Town Council get its own? Well, we do actually have loads of notice boards, but there's these huge spaces in every car park, usually where people are waiting to get out, so you actually look at them. The one closest to certainly one of the bins that is on street at the moment, the jewel bin, you actually sort of, as you're waiting to cross over to get out of Sainsbury's, you see it, it's right in your face. And invariably, all it's got in it is a notice saying, this is a Waverley notice board, you cannot put anything in here. And, to me, it just seems an obvious choice. If you've got a campaign or whatever, put it in at least the notice boards. I mean, you've got them in every single car park in Farnham, I presume they're everywhere else as well. Huge, great space, absolutely nothing in it, and, use it, especially as they're places where people actually stop,
I think there's something we should look at. I don't know who's responsible for updating those notice boards, but we should be using them. I've had issues with Waverley notice boards in the past, as you know, and it's free as far as we're concerned. Let's use it. Okay, thank you. Anything else, members? Councillor Byam.
Well, I'm also very pleased that our recycling rates are increasing, and it's an uphill struggle, and I know it is. And talking to our residents and what have you, I mean, the food waste side, I talk to people about it, and they say, oh, well, no, we don't have any food waste, so we don't do anything. But what they do have, of course, goes into the black bin, and they won't do anything. And we've heard, it seems that our local badgers have found a way of opening up green bins. At least that's what I'm told. I can't believe that it's true, but if you close it properly, but nevertheless, that's what's being said. I had another comment, which was a serious comment. Well, they were used to problems from where they came from originally, with monitor lizards coming down and raiding the food waste areas, and therefore they didn't put food waste out in Waverley. I haven't seen too many monitor wizards around to cause the problem, but that really was an honest statement from somebody as to whatever. And the other thing is that so many, and the comment about the street litter bins, you know, with the separated waste and recycling there, and the bits that, we haven't got those in Bramley, but looking at other things that go on, people are just not interested in understanding. They're obviously capable of understanding, they're not interested in understanding, and they'll throw it wherever they please, often on the floor, of course.
I think Waverley and Rob and his team understand what you're saying, absolutely. I mean, we have this discussion regularly, and it's trying to get that message across is the biggest problem, isn't it? Yeah, thank you. Who's next? Councillor Else.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just wondering whether, with the influx of all these new houses that we're going to have to prepare ourselves for, and with the new initiative of providing new homeowners with 140 litre bins rather than 240 litre bins, whether we ought to prepare ourselves for a deluge of complaints. I just wondered, the 140 litre bin for the residuals been in place for new homes since June last year. I'm interested to know whether you've actually had very many complaints or whether it's just been accepted as what is. Thank you.
Chairman, I'm not aware of any complaints. Certainly, what we're looking at doing is in an incremental way moving to a system where there is more capacity for recycling and less for residual, on the basis that 65 to 70% of what people throw away is recyclable, either as dry recycling or food waste. And I think if people move into a new home and that is what they're provided with, then that's what they get used to and accept.
It forces you into good habits, actually, doesn't it? Okay, I'd like to come in now, Rob. I'd just like to say a big thank you to your department and Veolia. Over the new year, I've never had a chance to say this. We had a problem at the waste site in Way Hill, and it was overflowing. And I went down. The photographs went out on Saturday night. I went down first thing Monday morning to check on it, and the Veolia officers were there. The contract manager was there. Eric, who's the site manager, was there, and somebody else, and they were all in their suits, and they were clearing the rubbish up. Okay. Apparently, they received an email from you or your department at 2:30 a.m. that morning, asking them to go down, and they were down there and they were working hard. They did a good job. Would you pass on a big thank you to them for me, would you? And well done to your department, because it was really good work. Well done. Okay, thank you. Councillor Isherwood, followed by Councillor Byam.
I was just going to say the 120 litre bin for rubbish or 140, is more than ample. I mean, if I wheel my grey one out once every 2 months, it's still not full, so, my blue bin, my recycling bin, is full up every fortnight. So, I don't see the smaller bin being a problem. In fact, it might encourage some of our people, and not just Waverley. I mean, you only have to drive down the road to see where the recycling's going, everything from pizza, cartons, bottles, cans, the whole lot. And now they've cut the grass on the side of the A3, the 31, whatever else. We are a pretty grubby nation.
For information, they are clearing that at the present time. They're up as far as Bramshot now.
At a considerable cost. I think members would like to know what the costs are. I was staggered when the officers told me what closing one lane for litter picking costs.
You want to come back with that figure?
But Chairman, I haven't got the precise figures on me, but
approximately.
Certainly, traffic management on a trunk road like that costs tens of thousands of pounds every time we do it. So it's a very expensive business. Yeah.
Councillor Byam?
Yeah, I'd like all of us to be clear on this 140 litre bin situation. I'll say what I think I understand. If you've got new properties being built, we do not provide a bin. Can you nod that that's correct?
No.
We don't provide a bin. It's up to the developer to provide a bin or the householder to buy a bin. If they want to buy 2 40-litre bins, they can. If they want to buy 140 litres bins from us, it'll be quite a lot cheaper because they're subsidised. So we don't provide them with any form of black bin, but we do provide all the recycling bins. Now, is that statement correct, or because clearly some members misunderstand that situation, quite understandably, because if a big housing estate on, who provides their wheelie bins?
You want to come back on that, Rob? Advise us all, please.
Chairman, there's a couple of sort of conflicting stories there. One is that if somebody comes to us who lives in an existing property in Waverley and their bin is either broken or has been lost, then we will provide them with a 140-litre bin free of charge, or we will give them the option to purchase a 240-litre bin. With new developments, you're right that the developer is responsible for providing the bin. However, our planning advice when it comes to new developments has changed, so that developers are now instructed that they need to provide a 140 as opposed to a 240. So any new developments as of the date that Councillor Else mentioned, the planning advice that we provide is that they should get a 140-litre bin for residual waste.
Thank you, Rob. Councillor Coburn.
Can I just ask a half-serious question? It's something that's always intrigued me. As a great fan of the Teletubbies, Nunus, who sort of sucks everything up, and having watched my son open the fridge door and do much the same thing, why can't we sort of hoover street, the edges of roads? It always fascinates me that it's such a slow process, painstakingly picking up. And it just... Is there not an engineering solution to this? A vehicle that could quite literally go all the way along and suck up the rubbish? I mean, are we missing something here? Why has nobody invented it?
Rob.
Chairman, on the street sweeping side, that is effectively what a street sweeper is. It is a massive vacuum cleaner with some brushes on the end of it. However, it isn't economically viable in a borough like Waverley to apply that same technology to pavements and so on. In a lot of larger city and town centres, they will have a small pedestrian push along street sweeper essentially, but in a borough like this it just doesn't make sense, because that would have to be moved around all the time and put on the back of a vehicle and so on. So we tend to use the old traditional manual methods when it comes to clearing our pavements and
We have the road into the station, which is privately owned by the station, and that was a bit like the A3 and A31 cut back and revealed huge amounts of rubbish. And, I really felt I could take my own vacuum cleaner along it. You know what I mean? It just seems to be such an obvious solution when you've got a smallish bank. It's so much faster than doing it by hand. I'm just amazed that there isn't somebody who's invented a Teletubby Nunus to just go along. It just seems to be a perfect solution for this sort of area to get rid of the...
And like a large vacuum pipe sort of thing. It goes, I see what you mean. Okay, thank you. Councillor Byam.
Just a statement. It's National Litter Day or something in a few weeks, this weekend. Bramley, one of our residents in Bramley is organising a litter pickup there, and she advertised on Street Life, and she got 3 parish councillors to support her, and I don't think anybody else. I hope there are more come out. By the way, I'm one of those parish councillors that are going out. But the serious question, though, is: do you provide a pickup service for any litter that is being collected? And how do we actually achieve that? I know they're talking about borrowing litter pickers, etc. How do we get the collection done if they haven't already organised?
Well, when we encourage community groups to contact us to arrange their community litter picks, as you say, we'll provide them with litter picks, with black sacks and with high-vis jackets if required. And at that time, we will also discuss with them whether or not they want us to collect the waste that they've picked. And so if that conversation hasn't taken place, please do contact the team and they'll make the necessary arrangements.
Thank you. Are members content to note the report? Agreed?
Agreed, yeah.
Thank you. Item 8, Personalisation and Prevention Partnership Fund. End of year 2 delivery report. I'd like to invite Daniel Brett now to introduce the report. Daniel?
Thank you very much, Chairman. My name is Daniel Brett, and I'm the Projects Coordinator for the Personalisation, Prevention and Partnerships Fund. I'm going to hopefully give you quite a short presentation, just brings to life the report a little bit. I am aware of time, so thank you very much for all members for inviting me along to present to you today. There will be a space for questions at the end, so please do feel free to ask them. Just a short slide. I always like to begin when talking about well-being in Waverley. We are an affluent borough that is an excellent place to live, but we do have quite acute health needs in some areas, and it's important, I think, to sometimes reiterate them, because I think they're the things that demand all of our efforts to resolve from all statutory partners, so both the community, statutory providers, and also residents themselves. The Personalisation, Prevention and Partnerships Programme, or the PPP as it's conveniently known for short, is funded from Surrey County Council Adult Social Care. It started in 2013 through approval by Executive, and it was a provisional funding of 5 years. That was approved at the end of 2013, with myself as the Projects Coordinator being recruited in summer of 2014. And last year's report was mainly focused around the scoping, mapping of new projects and activities, although there was some delivery to report on. So hopefully within this report, you'll be able to see some of the progress we've made over the last year as these projects really get going. The programme itself is designed to improve local preventative services delivered through the boroughs and districts and their partners. Essentially, this is a response to pressures on adult social care and actually responding to some of the demand they have there, and looking at ways in which the communities, districts and boroughs can make the most of their already quite substantial wellbeing activities, such as parks, countryside, leisure, housing, and really make the most of these to improve residents' wellbeing and hopefully reduce demand on adult social care services. The 5 years of funding is provisional on demonstrating progress towards outcomes. What this means is every quarter reports are submitted to the Senior Commissioning Officer from Adult Social Care, where we have to demonstrate how we're meeting those outcomes through a series of different measures, and those can include your numbers, such as attendees to various different classes, improvements in well-being, so how individuals' well-being has improved over the course of these activities, and also through case studies and reporting in the more kind of qualitative side of things. The outcomes are broadly around choice of activities, which is personalisation, reduced demand on adult social care, and new community partnerships. I think it's really important to note that these aren't necessarily delivering adult social care services for less money. These are making the most and enhancing the role of wellbeing activities already taking place within the borough, or indeed in some places using the funding to kind of pioneer new opportunities and see how we could connect up what resources we already have and just make them easier for residents to access and improve their wellbeing. The fund has transitioned over to the Better Care Fund, which is a joint pot between health and social care. This isn't necessarily a challenge, more of an opportunity to really make explicit that relationship with both social care and health. With a lot of the preventative work you're doing, it's impossible to isolate the outcomes for social care as opposed to health, for example, GP visits. So in actual fact, this is an opportunity to make the most of those resources and hopefully in the future withdraw down more funding to fund these activities. And it's also a good opportunity to evaluate and measure the success of our projects. Waverley has a very good track record of delivery and getting things going, but sometimes actually evaluating and monitoring the success of some of these in terms of reduced hospital admissions, reduced adult social care visits is quite challenging for us to do in isolation. So by working with our partners, we can really actually establish the kind of evidence basis for a lot of our preventative work. The aims of the PPP fund are broadly around prevention, as I've already mentioned, improving the well-being of our residents, which is something that we've done as a council for a very long time, and pioneering new models of best practice. Essentially, this is making the most of our size as a district and borough to start things off on a small scale, test them out, and then hopefully be able to improve the capacity of these services around the county as well. So really kind of pioneering new activities, testing things out and trialling new and interesting projects that improve the well-being of our residents. There is an excellent document about districts in health and wellbeing produced by the Local Government Association, which uses the term place shaping. Now, broadly, this means local coordination, which involves working with our partners on a community basis and indeed our services to really kind of understand how everything fits together at a local level. The themes, as I'm sure you're aware, are around social isolation. We've got a very low connectivity as a borough. Community partnerships, obviously a long-standing, vibrant community sector, and keeping active, so making the most of our green space as a district. What I'd hopefully like to do is just demonstrate 3 case studies very briefly that kind of illustrate our approach and bring to life some of the work we've done over the past year and a half. Central to this, and it's a lovely photo, it's one of my favourites actually, is around creativity. Trying to use those resources that we've already got. One of the key challenges in Waverley is obviously dementia. We've got some of the highest predicted rates of dementia in Surrey. So we've taken the normal routes, which is around signing up as a dementia-friendly borough, improving training and awareness for staff members and community members, working with our partners and businesses, such as Mears and Places for People Leisure, who provide the leisure services, and also liaising with businesses such as Chambers of Commerce to really kind of promote the dementia-friendly approach to them as well. But this has also involved trying to go a little bit further and think about how we can actually pioneer new methods that might support and help people with dementia, initially within Waverley, but hopefully further afield as well. Some of these have been through the reminiscence work carried out by Charlotte Hall in the Arts Service, which involves Keepsake, Vitamin G, which is a series of projects working with the Centres for Older People to really improve activities for them, particularly around dementia. But this has also involved a Dementia Diaries project, which brought together young and old using music as a catalyst to start conversations. Now, initially this was delivered in 4 care settings with links to local schools. But the great thing about this is there's been a lot of interest actually around using this as a model for care settings to enable maybe younger family members who are coming into a care setting. It's quite a challenging and intimidating environment. A really ready-made set of activities they can use to connect with an older member of that care home who may have dementia as well. So by doing something quite small scale, we've been able to actually build up a model of best practice that's had quite a lot of interest generated both through Surrey Arts, who are interested in it as a training programme, but also through private care homes as well, who are really excited about it as an opportunity to increase the activities for their members. And this was actually successful in being awarded a Surrey Living and Ageing Well Award at the recent awards, and we were the only local authority to be awarded that out of 7 different awards. So quite a good achievement from Charlotte and the rest of the team that worked on that, because there were some really good people up for that, such as the volunteers from Surrey Libraries and a whole host of other fantastic community initiatives. Partnerships is another key theme of the personalisation programme, and that involves working with existing partners to really kind of refine their wellbeing activities. Something that's quite central to this is the partnership we've got going on with Voluntary Action South West Surrey, which involves a Welcome to Volunteering project. This project links volunteers with mental health challenges, physical disabilities, who've really lost confidence and are finding it hard to volunteer in normal roles with organisations, and offers them a supported volunteering package. This is a new environment for Voluntary Action South West Surrey. Traditionally, they focus more on listing voluntary organisations and just connecting your normal volunteers with them. So they've been able to actually introduce some measures around supported volunteerings into their normal service, and also improve the support they give to organisations into actually how to accept supported volunteers and what might be the challenges around that. Another really important theme is around transformation. So this involves working with existing services within the council, delivering some of those services I've just mentioned, to try and make the most of the excellent service, knowledge, skills, expertise that they already offer. A good example of this is the Easy Move service, which initially responded as an opportunity between housing to begin to respond to changes in housing benefit that were affecting a lot of housing tenants, and around a lot of the kind of anecdotal and also evidence we'd experience as officers within communities around the horrible stories you hear of individuals confined to their living rooms and they can't move around the house due to mobility issues and the insuitability of their home. So this post has involved an officer going out and providing that one-on-one support to individuals to really explore the suitability of their accommodation and help them with that supported move, both in looking at the actual physical space but also at the community themselves that they'll be going into. So what have we achieved over the last year? Well, we've had 17 projects shaped and commissioned from the delivery of an initial activity list back in 2013. Mentioned the Surrey Living and Ageing Well Award. 4,000 attendees at health and wellbeing classes at our leisure centres. Over 25 organisations supported to work with vulnerable volunteers. Nearly 500 people supported to access arts and cultural activities that improve wellbeing. And every single quarter we've successfully demonstrated progress towards our outcomes to Surrey County Council and been able to draw down that funding for the future. And importantly as well, there are exit strategies in place for every single project to ensure that we are actually improving the sustainability of these and leaving a legacy behind, so when that funding either comes to an end or indeed is recommissioned in some other fashion, there is a good legacy, whether it's either support for organisations themselves, a network in terms of a community, or simply a good a partnership that improves the referrals that were already existing. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Yeah. Can I go first this time? Is that all right, Councillor Coburn? You don't mind? Can I have a look at that first slide again, please? Sure. You can see there that looking at those figures, we're the highest in Surrey, dementia, depression, suicide, etc. Why do you think that? Is there one particular reason that is the highest? Because I have my own thoughts on that.
I think the age-related ones are probably something that most people are aware of alongside the connectivity ones. The depression and suicide ones, from my own experience, because they're measured less frequently, they could be to do with the financial crisis, financial crash, happening in London. But they're not sure. I mean, these are figures. Some of these are due to social isolation. Some of these are due to ageing. Depression is much more prevalent as you get older in terms of demographics. Suicide, the rates are quite low throughout the whole of Surrey, so individual cases can skew those. And having a main train line running through the borough is probably an instance of that.
The reason I asked the question is that I think that we've probably got the worst public transport service in the whole of Surrey, in Waverley, basically because we're a rural community. I understand the excessive cost of rural transport, but I think a lot of it is to do with connectivity, personally, and isolation. Fine.
Chairman, just to reinforce that point, looking across Surrey, there's something called a connectivity index, which is basically addresses the question, how easy is it for an individual living in an area to access their friends, the GP, the local shops? And looking across all the boroughs and districts in Surrey, Waverley has the lowest connectivity index. And so the challenges of rural isolation are a challenge across Surrey, but are a particular challenge for this area, and that might contribute in part to that figure.
Thank you for that. Councillor Coburn?
I'm sure that's true, because that's one of the points that I was going to raise. Just first of all, I'd just like to congratulate the officers on what they've achieved. I've seen it in the flesh, as it were, in Farnham. It's been terrific fun. And I love the way the children interact. I mean, my own grandsons are whatever they are now, 9 and 7. And they just go into these people. They have no preconceptions. They don't... they have no inhibitions either. So the relationship between the young and the old is just wonderful. And, you know, as I say, if the elderly are right on the button, or whether they're sort of in the early stage of dementia, for the young people, it doesn't matter at all. I mean, they just take them as they find them, and it's just been 100% fun. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the problem is the lack of transport. You know, being involved with both Woodlarts, which is a home for disabled people, Brightwell's, the day centre that Waverley runs. You know, it is just a nightmare getting people from A to B, the increasing cost of all of this. And because of this, people that, you know, would be quite happy to go out and socialise just cannot do it. And this is really going to be a continuing problem. I don't see how it can solve itself. Well, I think, again, going back to planning, which always frustrates me, is when they get a planning application in and it says the nearest bus stop is 500 metres away. Well, bully for the bus stop. I mean, there's no bus. You know, the bus stop might still be there. And we had one classic planning application in that was going to offer us 2 state-of-the-art bus shelters with real-time flashing lights and goodness knows what. I mean, what was it going to flash? A week on Tuesday? Every third Monday, you know. And I think this is a real issue. I mean, we're in the biggest settlement over in Farnham. We don't have buses, so goodness knows what it's like for the people that are even more isolated. We at least have a very good taxi service, and the taxi drivers are just brilliant with the elderly. You know, they take them home, they carry their shopping, they do little journeys, you know, they take them to the hairdressers, wait for them, then take them to the shops. Absolutely brilliant. But, you know, you've got to be able to afford that. You've got to be in an area where the taxis work. And as I say, because we're such a rural borough, it is a real problem. And I'm sure that does contribute, as you said, to any of the other issues. Because once people become isolated, then all the other issues crack in. And I remember some of you perhaps did contact as a student. I remember doing that, and it was purely about going out and taking the elderly out once a month to have tea. And that was, I mean, I was a student in the 60s, so we're going back some time. But, you know, it is always that problem, you know. People can't, if they can't just make the journey, they can't do all these wonderful things that are happening across the borough. But congratulations to you and to the officers. I think what you've done has been absolutely terrific.
I mean, that is an excellent point and a good reflection. There's a lot we can do, and there are some constraints as well. One of the really interesting things to happen for this wellbeing work is the actual coordination and working quite closely with all the different community partners, which has meant at the recent Surrey County Council's transportation review, we've really been able to produce quite a coordinated, multi-agency, multi-organisation response to actually make our voice heard in terms of the challenges in the area. So part of it is what we can do, but it's also about being coordinated and ensuring that Waverley as a whole, all the organisations that improve the well-being of individuals are being able to have a single voice and a good point of contact to those people that can affect change around transportation.
Councillor James, followed by Councillor Else.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Councillor Coburn raised a very, very interesting point, and ones which I think we ought to maybe ask in terms of noting, because the report presents a very rosy picture. That's fine, I accept that, but there are these very real disparities between our 4 conurbations and our villages. So it would be useful to see a breakdown of this report's findings so that we can see, you know, are we really addressing the issues in our smaller villages? So now if I give mine, we have a voluntary coffee morning on a Wednesday morning run by the churches. There is, I think, still an elderly fitness group that meets weekly. But with the impact on Rowleys and Age UK and Cranley, quite frankly, they've got nowhere else to go. And coupled with the point that you were making about the bus service, I'd like to see and like to understand that this good news, to use the usual phrase, actually does relate to every single community across Waverley and isn't just something that's delivering some good work in Cranley, let's say Godalming, Farnham and Hazelmere, but not touching on the other much, much smaller villages.
I think that's a very good point, actually. If we could see the breakdown of what's being done where and what's available where by area. Is that possible?
We have put aside funding to look at every single main area within Waverley. So, I mean, that is mainly based around the urban accommodations. But obviously there are some universal projects that work across and have referrals from some of the smaller villages as well. I think it's really important to note that it would probably be unfair of me and the programme to say we can affect every single village within the Waverley area. The funding is just not sufficient for that kind of widespread work. So a lot of what we have been doing is focusing on where there is the most acute need and where we can make the most impact. And frequently, but not always, that is in the main urban conurbations. We are improving that, and what we are doing is making sure that when we are looking and doing work within, for example, Farnham or indeed Cranley, they are linking up with the smaller towns and parishes that surround that, to the extent that when working with Godalming Town Council over the Community Navigator project, we were quite firm in saying that we wanted the smaller towns and villages that surrounded Godalming to be included within it, and it not just be a remit just for Godalming Town Council itself. So it is something we are very keen on. But unfortunately, I don't think there is a quick and easy solution, and we certainly probably aren't being able to deliver the same level of services in some of the smaller villages within Waverley.
Councillor Ells, followed by Councillor Ramsdale. Oh, sorry, apologies. Councillor Byam, followed by Councillor Ells.
I think Councillor Ells should go first.
Okay, Councillor Ells.
Thank you, Councillor Byam. So the 4 main settlements are well accommodated, and I understand about the finance situation, but it's the villages that need support. So as long as that's recognised, I mean, for example, my older people in my village who don't have their own transport manage to get out of the village on a Friday on the hopper, and that's it really. I mean, they could wait for a bus early in the morning or whatever, but there's not too many buses, so they know where they are with the hopper. That's once a week. And then we've got Help in Elstead, which helps them to get about as well, and I think probably most villages have some sort of setup like that. But it is the villages that need support. It's the villages where you're going to find most of the social isolation, I feel. And although I could be wrong, but that's just my feeling. I run a group in my village which accommodates older people. Once a month we meet, and that's probably the only organisation in the village that is especially for older people. And there are 3 volunteers there, myself and 2 others, who would really be very interested in learning this creative seated dance. But how have you promoted this? How do we hear about this? How do other people in the villages hear about this? Are you reaching out to them? Because if you're not, perhaps you can give that some thought. We'd be there like a shot. You know, you wouldn't have to come to us, we'd come to you. And the other thing I wanted to ask was, if I may, Chairman, your future projects, social prescribing, a pilot's being scoped to the Farnham area. I hate to feel like this, but I mean, I have been involved in working with the older members of our community for many, many years, or in my past life, and my problem, the hiccup, has always been the GPs. Now, you're working with the 2 clinical commissioning groups, but do you have the GPs signed up? Because that can always, in my view, be the stumbling point. And how are you sort of working towards getting them signed up towards this? Without them, your social prescribing won't work.
Thank you. 2 very good questions there. In terms of the villages and creative seated dance, I mean, that was a programme of training for volunteers and staff. I can ask Charlotte Hall, who's the officer who delivered that, to get in contact. One of the things we are really looking to expand on in future years is using the churches as a network for promoting and distributing activities. We've had some good success up in the small kind of rural isolated communities using church networks, just due to the facilities and the volunteer base they have to do things such as befriending and maybe promoting some of these things in the harder to reach communities. So that is definitely something we're considering for the future year and working to improve. Social prescribing, I think you're absolutely right. it sounds like we're reinventing the wheel, when in actual fact it's just getting that link working as effectively as possible. I think GPs in the past have wanted to connect up to these types of activities, but there hasn't been the right space, both in terms of their own diaries and also in terms of the kind of organisational space around them. One of the reasons why the project is initiated in Farnham is because that CCG is specifically looking at that area, that they only have that area to manage within Waverley. And we've developed some really good links with them, and particularly with GPs, and a few high-profile GPs who are actually on the clinical commissioning group board within Farnham are very keen to get this going. And we're at a recent project board meeting, so we're very much on board and see this within the future direction for GP services.
I'll come back to you later. Councillor Byam?
Thank you, Chairman. Interesting, I thought PPP was the people who phoned me up and keep on asking me if I signed up. I didn't realise they've been turning all these people away. And perhaps you've been trying to contact me, but Councillor Coburn mentioned about, you know, her involvement or seeing what was happening in Farnham, which sounds lovely and great. I don't think that, I mean, we've got lots and lots of different groups in Bramley and the surrounding villages close to us. I'm not aware of any particular contact with us and how parish councils, you mentioned the church, and quite reasonably so. I think parish councils also provide a lot of links for people who are not churchgoers and therefore won't link in with that, and doing things through them, or at least finding out about things through them, and perhaps getting volunteers working with them. And we're doing a number of things in Bramley on that land. And indeed, we've got a dementia morning, or each Monday morning, with one particular gentleman who runs a local care facility as well. He's not getting very much response from the public, and I'm not blaming Waverley for that at all. He just doesn't get it. In terms of the communication or bus routes, I mean, the east of Waverley on the Cranley route, and I apologise to Ewhurst because they don't get the same level of service because they get less frequent buses going on to them, but it's one of the best services probably in the whole of Waverley, and it is unsupported by Surrey because it doesn't need to be. It's a commercial service, except for 1 or 2 buses in a day. But that still doesn't get to some of the people. I mean, one particular lady that I watch over and to some degree look after with other friends lives at 3/4 of a mile at the end of a longish cul-de-sac in Surrey, perhaps. Right at the end of our road, she lost her driving. Oh no, she stopped driving at 94, and she feels isolated because she can't get anywhere, but she hasn't got the gallop goes. But equally, she hasn't got dementia in any way whatsoever, so she doesn't need those services. So there's a balance there across the whole of the spectrum of people. It's not just people with dementia or whatever. Other people feel isolated, and many of them don't want to go. And I despair at times trying to get people to join in, but they've got other things going on in their lives. There's a whole range of different things. But there are all sorts of organisations in various places. In Waverley in Bramley we have I keep on saying newcomers, and that's the old name, and I can't remember the new name that I gave. Perhaps Damien can remember what I told him on the phone today. There was another name, but we're inviting all of the clubs and societies and everybody to come to the village hall once a year and put out their stalls and their wares, and it can be the day centre, the tennis club, the this, the that, everything you can think of, probably 25 or 30 organisations in one go, getting people to. But they've still got this problem: how do you get them there if they're not mobile or lose their confidence, even though they're not suffering from any form of dementia whatsoever? So it is a struggle, I agree, and I think I would love to see, certainly me, but parish borough councils, I think, ought to be more in the loop of understanding what's going on. I know I've been invited and come to events, but so that we understand and perhaps can help, hopefully can help, because clearly, from Jenny's point of view and from mine, things we want to do, we don't necessarily get the opportunity to gear into the other things that are happening.
Councillor Ramsdale, followed by Councillor Else.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's a really good presentation. As somebody who saw my parents go ahead of me and need many of these types of services that weren't available then, I think they're really good responses. I particularly like the way you're providing materials for young children to be able to communicate to elderly people. I've seen too many young children standing around wondering what to do with no idea as to how to start. Whereas if you give them something they're familiar with, music, pictures, records, and the older person responds to, especially if they relate to them from a long time in the past, it's great. The bit that concerns me, and I go back to being an accountant in this, of course, is the financial risk. I wonder if you could give us some feedback, Dan, on what is the risk that Surrey County Council faces financial pressure and decides to start withdrawing the funding, but we've got lots of people out there who know that Waverley provide all these services and all this help. And suddenly we've got no money, but we're potentially going to get the pain of not doing stuff we did in the past. So that's kind of the risk, and I wondered what we're doing to make sure that doesn't happen. I got the impression before it wasn't being left on its own.
No, thank you very much. That's something we address in every quarterly monitoring report, and we have a risk update around key issues, and funding is always on there, because I think whenever you're working with other people's money and having to demonstrate progress towards outcomes, it is always a risk that funding could be withdrawn. I think there's a three-step method we've been going about how to deal with this risk, and the first one is we only spend funding we have. So, I mean, that includes, for example, if we wanted to run a project across 3 years, we wouldn't use the funding from every single consecutive year. We'd fund it from that 1 year's funding for 3 years. So we know once we've got that money in the bank, essentially, we're able to provide that on a consistent basis going forward. And that's thanks for the accountants from understanding that's the nature of this fund and how it's funded. The second one is around exit strategies, so really kind of working with any project to understand that this is not going to be an ongoing service we can guarantee to be delivered every year. So that involves building up networks, connections, models of best practice in some instances, so that when a project comes to the end of its funded period, it's leaving the community itself in a better place than when it started. So there are networks, volunteers, people that can take that on, or even just tools and tips for the community themselves. For example, with the Welcome to Volunteering project, they are producing a kind of guidebook for organisations, so using some of their experience and learning they've had over the past year in how to support, how they can better support maybe individuals wanting to volunteer with higher needs. And third is relationships, both up and down. So up involves having a very good close working relationship with Surrey, so we understand what the funding pressures are and what their direction of travel is, and we have been successful in drawing down funding so far, so that relationship has worked very well. We have a good working relationship with them around that, but that's also working relationships down as well, so in terms of really understanding how projects are being delivered with the commission parties, so working quite closely with the groups, organisations, individuals that are delivering these projects, that they are short term in essence. They're not going to be on for 10, 15 years, or can't guarantee that, and working with them to make the most of their opportunities in that time frame. For a lot of the projects on there as well, that is a normal way of working. For example, Charlotte Hall's arts funded projects frequently have a different programme of activity every year, so in terms of expectation of consistency of service isn't there for those particular types of activities.
Chairman, would you mind if I just added just a little bit to what Dan has said, particularly around the risks? A significant risk is that as the clinical commissioning groups and adult social care seek to shift more of their funding into preventative activity, which is what we've been talking about here, there is an opportunity for us, if we move quickly and we're effective, to prove the value of these sorts of services. I think if we weren't doing this, there would be a very real risk that prevention doesn't get, those organisations don't invest in prevention, and we continue providing services in the way they've been provided for many years. What I'm hopeful is the more that we do this, the more it's successful, the more we can demonstrate the added value, the more that we can make the case for them to increase the contribution to exactly these sorts of services. I'm not saying for a moment that everything will remain the same and that every single project will deliver fantastic outcomes, but I hope there's enough here to show our adult social care and our clinical commissioning group colleagues that this is a worthwhile activity to continue to invest in the long term. But we have to prove the case first.
Thank you for that, Damien. Councillor Else.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, a couple of questions, if I may. First of all, the creative seated dance. You've described your exit strategy, I think, just now, where you were saying you're going to be, you know, if it comes to an end, you will be leaving volunteers behind who will have been trained. So the creative seated dance, when people are given this training, do they receive some sort of qualification? So that's good. So that's one thing. The other thing is, may I say that you mentioned churches, but if you work, and Councillor Byam mentioned the very point that I wanted to come back to just now, that if you contact ward members, they are your very best source of what's going on their patch. And I think officers sometimes forget that, not deliberately, but I think it's just something that you don't always engage with. But ward members are the people who know what's going on, who know what the local needs are. And I think you would find that very valuable exercise if you were to communicate more directly with them. The other thing is, are there any plans for people or organisations to pay anything to Waverley? Maybe not now, initially, but is it something that's been thought of? Because it's all very well giving all this away, but if you're worried about funding, is there a method? Is there any mileage at all in thinking about getting organisations or individuals to pay for the service that you're going to be offering? I don't know if there is or not. And my last question, with the increase in the elderly population and the levels of dementia, etc., which we are constantly bombarded with, how on earth are we going to demonstrate the outcome? How are we going to demonstrate the value of what we've done, the money that we've saved, the National Health Service? How are we going to do that? Because as we're maybe bringing down, keeping people out of hospital, there's another load waiting to go in. So I'm just wondering how confident we can be that we are going to be able to deliver some sort of evidence of the outcome.
Thank you. In terms of funding for various different projects, some are funded, for example, the activities at leisure centres, and some are delivered free, for example, to centres for older people. So there is a balance between ensuring the sustainability and also testing out new methods of best practice. One of the interesting things to happen is that obviously with the shift towards private care homes, there is large amounts of funding actually within the private care home market to support activities that reduce social isolation. Projects such as that Charlotte's been working on, delivered through Reminiscence, could prove fantastic opportunities for these type of care homes to actually purchase in the future. And we have been working with the clinical commissioning groups alongside setting up a care home provider forum just to advertise these types of opportunities for them and potentially draw in funding in the future. I mean, those talks are very early on at the stage that the care home forum hasn't been delivered, but it does offer an exciting opportunity in the future for ensuring the sustainability of this work. In terms of dementia, and how to evidence the effects that these projects are having, is a really, really good and an extremely challenging one as well. But it is something that, by working closer with health, GPs, social care, we can begin to work with their quite substantial resources that are able to start mapping those individuals' access to, for example, GP visits or repeat admissions. For example, with social prescribing, individuals are actually, GPs are paid or charged for every time someone gets readmitted to hospital. So it is a case of identifying who those individuals are, and you're actually able to map how many visits they've had to hospital in the future. There's no quick and easy fix, unfortunately, with it, but it is something we're in good conversation with all of the health partners around how we can better evidence the good stuff that's going on around Waverley.
Thank you. Councillor Ramsdale, followed by Councillor Coburn.
this isn't so much a question of your specific presentation, but a wider thought. When I first went to university, we went to a freshers' fair, where all the organisations there kind of laid out what you could buy or take or join with them. And having now been involved in this particular conversation, but seen the awarding of the grants and lots of other initiatives we've got, and then you hear of groups in one part of Waverley, and you wonder, well, how do you get that great idea to happen over the rest of it? And just whether there'd be, and thinking of how Jenny was saying, Councillor Elsa was saying, how do I get to know about this particular type of dance? In fact, if she wasn't here now, how would her village ever get to hear about a particular kind of dance? And whether we should be laying on some sort of, I'll call it a fair, but in a large hall, perhaps here, or perhaps 4 times, that we invite all of the parish councils, all of the churches, all of the village hall teams, and I could go on, and we inform all of the councillors to inform all of their local parish people to come along and collect these good ideas. And of course, it could not just only be these are the good ideas of things you could do, these are the good ideas of how you can apply for a grant at parish council level, at Waverley level, maybe even get somebody from Surrey down on what's available there. Or maybe organisations like Age UK might want to come along and say, this is how we could support Age UK Elstead or whatever.
Sort of a roadshow, you mean? Sounds like a roadshow.
It does, Chairman. Or I think, as Councillor Byam described, as a showcase event. I do. But I do think, Chairman, there are so many fantastic local groups doing amazing work, but that other people outside that area are not aware of. Great ideas that could be shared and utilised across the organisation. One of the really exciting pieces of work that Dan and the team have been doing is around looking at those local groups and starting to map them so that we have a better shared understanding, not just as an organisation, but other organisations who are out there supporting people in the community. And it's one of the most powerful things, I think, we've found over the last year that's come out of this piece of work. And I think over the next year we should look at an opportunity to showcase and bring groups together to share good practice. I think it's a great idea.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Coburn.
You may call me Carol. No.
And there he did.
Just going back to Dan's point about how difficult it is to quantify what you're doing with elderly people, and certainly elderly people with dementia, it's equally difficult to quantify what you're doing for their carers. Because on Wednesday at the Brightwell Centre, we have the elderly gentleman's dementia lunch. And it's hilarious. I mean, it really is. They're people we've known for years. And, you know, they are such a fun group of people. There's lunch followed by activities. But while that's going on, their carers go off into the town and have some time to themselves. So what that does for their mental health, to give them that break, to give them a chance just to go, have their hair done, walk round, have a coffee, just have a conversation that they can't have, you know, with their husbands at the moment. So, you know, how you ever quantify this, I really don't know. But all I do know is that these gentlemen get a huge amount out of that, and that their carers get an equally, I can't tell you how much, I've no idea what it costs financially, but you know, in terms, again, of keeping the men out of hospital, but also the carers, it must be huge, because, you know, you'd end up with you know, whatever the number of people at the lunch, doubled with people needing help ultimately. So, you know, it is a huge benefit, not just to the people concerned who have a problem, but also to the people that look after them.
Chairman, if I could just very quickly reinforce that view. I'm really pleased that the new Care Act, Care Act 2014, that comes into force in April, primarily focused on adult social care and Surrey County Council, but absolutely recognises the key role of carers and places a statutory responsibility on adult social care to make sure, as well as considering the needs of the user, the carer is also centre stage, and that's a really positive development.
Thank you. Just one final comment. Oh, Councillor Else.
Just a tiny observation. In my experience, and I'm sure yours as well, anecdotal evidence is absolutely no use at all when you're trying to get Surrey County Council to approve more funding. It has to be specific, and that's the challenge for the officers, and it's not easy.
Thank you. Looking through your presentation, one of the big pluses I feel is the Easy Move scheme. Particularly in my ward at Ralston House. I've been working with residents over the last 10 months or something, 12 months. These are residents who are on their own and have a 3-bedroom house and whatever, and they're isolated. And we've managed to find them appropriate accommodation at Ralston House, and they are really, really happy. You know, I monitor them regularly. I see them at my council surgery, and they really are pleased with what's going on there. So congratulations to everybody involved. I think it's a fantastic service. Well done. Okay. Right. Thank you, Daniel, for your presentation. It was excellent. Are members content to note the report? Thank you very much. Well done. Well done. Okay. Moving on to item 9, Performance Management Report, Quarter 3. I would now like to invite a new face to the Chamber for some of us. Louise Norrie to introduce the report, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just briefly, this report sets out the performance in Quarter 3, which is ending in December. As you know, the subcommittee had a detailed discussion about the annex and the performance contained within that, as reflected in the very copious notes behind that. And the subcommittee would like to recommend 3 changes to targets, one relating to major applications determined within 13 weeks and making that a slightly tougher target, the percentage of building control applications checked, again, slightly tougher target, and easing the third one, which is the removal of fly tips, which the subcommittee recognised was quite a challenging target of 1 day, and recommending it should go up to 1.5. And that's the report, Chairman. Thank you.
Members, any comments? No. Councillor Ramsdale.
Thank you for the report. Yes, I'm in total agreement with everything you said so far. The big thing I wanted to pick out was how, in the notes of the subcommittee, you identified areas where we were saying we'd like more information because we think we can do better. That didn't happen as much as I would have liked it to have happened over the last couple of years. The fact that material's in there for the next group to pick up, and hopefully you've got that to hand, I think will really enforce the use of performance indicators and the way they're used in the council, and we can then see which parts of the council to look at when the indicator isn't doing what we thought it would. Whereas some of them at the moment, if it turns red, you don't know which way to look to know who needs to do something. So I think there's great scope for improvement, and I like the way the new minutes have included them, so thank you.
Yes, we had a discussion about the minutes earlier on. Well done. It's very good indeed. Thank you. Are the members content to note the report and the subcommittee's comments to be forwarded to the executive? Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Item 10. There are no items under there are no issues under item 10, and that brings the meeting to an end. Thank you for attending. Thank you, officers. Thank you, members of the public, and thank you, members. Well done, and have a safe journey.